G'day footy lovers, Dane here from Clarkey's Rugby League column with Clarkey Reacts for the 9th of September, a daily YouTube show where I dive into all the NRL news and give my initial reaction straight off the bat. It is a very relaxed segment, guys. I'm not going to be yelling and screaming like they do in some other shows. I don't want to go too in-depth, but I do want to go more in-depth than my TikTok videos where I react within 3 minutes, and Facebook and Instagram where I'm in the comments section sometimes, but largely I just want to get you guys the news. But yeah, Clarkey Reacts is a more relaxed sort of show every day where I discuss the news with you guys and break it down a little bit more. So let's dive on into it. And if you are new here, hopefully you enjoyed the video and hopefully I can see you back on a consistent basis. Joseph Sualii. The Kangaroos met today to begin discussing their World Cup squad, and as reported, they have agreed Joseph Sualii will be in their squad. What do I think about this news? I like it. I recently did my Australian Kangaroos lineup. I last updated it in round 24. Off the top of my head, Tedesco was my fullback. My left side was Alex Johnston and Latrell Mitchell. My right pairing was Valentine Holmes with Joseph Sualii outside him. Halves was Munster and Cleary. My front row was Payne Haas, Patrick Carrigan with Ben Hunt at hooker. My back rowers were Cameron Murray and Angus Crichton, Isaiah Yeo at lock, keeping that connection with Cleary. And my bench was Harry Grant, Tino Fa'asuamaleaui, Ruben Cotter, and Jeremiah Nanai. A lot of Queenslanders in there, but I just think the Origin series shown us that should be the squad. So I do have Sualii in my Australian Kangaroos lineup. Selfishly, and keeping in mind Sualii has said he will play at the World Cup, whether that's for Australia or Samoa. Selfishly, I almost want to see him play for Samoa just because it would be massive for them, a big boost. But we'd also get to see him at fullback, which is where everyone is most excited to see him play, given we're told that's his natural position. That's where he actually plays his best footy. Whereas in Australia, there's really no chance he goes ahead of an Australian fullback, James Tedesco. How do I know that? Because they play together at the Roosters and he's not ahead of him there at fullback. So that just makes sense. Selfishly, it'd be great to see him at fullback for Samoa, but as an Aussie, I would love to have him in my lineup. If he does go and play for Samoa and he does miss selection, then for Australia, we still have Josh Adokar there on the wing. So it's a loss, but it's not a huge loss because both are great players. I love this news, and let's say he doesn't play for the Kangaroos in this World Cup. Well, he might miss the boat because, by all accounts, Rugby Union are very, very keen for him. We could see a situation where 24 months from now, we are talking about Joseph Sualii as a 20-year-old, as a dual international for Australia. And that would be insane, but it's not out of the realms of possibility. So this kid has all the talent in the world. The Australian selectors made a great decision here by including him. Big news for Sharkies fans. The Sharks centre Siosifa Talakai is tracking well to overcome his ankle injury this round, according to Craig Fitzgibbon. Now, this could be the Sharks coach sort of continuing the confidence, keeping the Cowboys on edge a little bit, if you will. But I think I'd take Craig Fitzgibbon at face value. I don't think he's ever been an assistant coach to sort of play mind games. I can't see that starting now as a head coach. Maybe he is because finals are so important. And the injury, whilst it did look serious, it didn't look very serious. He sort of limped off the field, whereas typically syndesmosis injuries where there's a break or a really high-level sprain in the ankle, we see the players almost carried off the field. I am hopeful that Sharks centre Siosifa Talakai is there. He is an electric centre when he's on. If he's not there, the Sharks do have a few other options. You could see Matt Ikuvalu come into centre. Connor Tracy, I believe he returns from head injury. He could go in at centre. So they do have options, but they do lose a lot of 1%ers, I feel, when if Talakai falls out of their squad, because he does have the early hit-up that usually most sides just have from their wingers. He does offer a lot of post-contact meters, quick play the balls, potential for 6-to-goes. And so obviously it would be a huge loss for the Sharks, but by reports, he is going to be there, which is very, very exciting. And can't wait for Saturday. It's going to be the closest game of the finals. Cowboys and Sharks is going to be a very, very close game. Here's a really interesting one, guys. So it was revealed today by News Corp, speaking to Jason Taumalolo's manager, that he actually turned down the chance to play with the All Blacks, who wanted him to play for them in the World Cup. He was also weighing up a move to the NFL. I don't know if you guys remember, a few years ago, he and Valentine Holmes went over to do like a skills test or a skills challenge in the NFL. No one really talks about that anymore, but in the end, he didn't end up going down that route. He ended up staying with the Cowboys, which is great for us because a few years later in 2015, he won the Cowboys their first ever premiership. So, not won them, but he was a key part of it. He's now a co-captain of the club. He took them to the grand final in 2017 with Michael Morgan. He's won a Dally M medal. So he's gone on to do a lot in the NRL, but most importantly, and something I almost forgot, he has reignited international rugby league because his, what mainstream media called defection to Tonga, I wouldn't call it a defection, I would say he just returned to where he felt more comfortable, and it really ignited a lot of international footy. Because before he did that, players like Andrew Fafita, when he was in his prime, weren't turning down to play for the Kangaroos. The only players you saw playing for Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, some of these smaller countries, was players that were out of their prime and no longer getting selected for the Kangaroos or the Kiwis. So Tamalolo has done a hell of a lot for our game. I am so glad we didn't lose him to the All Blacks. But I do believe he probably would have made the All Blacks if he did go to rugby union. I would think he'd be a very good flanker. Maybe a number 8 now with his ball-playing skills. I think he'd probably be a little bit too small to be a lock or a loose-head prop in union, but definitely on the edge there as a flanker. And he would still play great on the edge in the NRL. Let's not act like he wouldn't. He'd still be superb if he did play back row in the NRL. That's where he started his career. But just moving into the middle when you're on $1 million, touching the ball more, really makes a lot more sense for JT. I can't really add too much more to this story. I'm just so glad he stayed in the game and we didn't lose him to union, even temporarily, like we have for RTS, Sam Burgess, Sonny Bill Williams, etc. Luke Keary believes the NRL should limit the amount of contact training sessions like the NFL does. We should have had less contact 5 years ago. I don't know why it has taken this long, he told reporters today. Really interesting, guys. Now, I'm not fully over this, but from what I do understand, CTE, which I'm not even sure what that stands for. CTE. It stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Basically, it's a brain condition. And it is a brain condition that is thought to be caused by repeated blows to the head and repeated episodes of concussion. It's particularly associated with contact sports such as boxing or American football. Most of the available studies are based on ex-athletes. So CTE, I'm not sure if it's fatal. It is progressive and fatal, meaning you will die from it eventually. 3 symptoms are memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control problems, aggression, depression, anxiety, suicidality, Parkinsonism, and eventually progressive dementia. If you guys remember Muhammad Ali, towards the end of his life, he had CTE, I believe. And what they found in America is it is a very big problem for a lot of their retired athletes. The helmets do not help. And if the helmets do not help, I want to stop people here in Australia saying maybe we should make all the players wear headgears. Because if a big-ass helmet in the NFL doesn't work, guys, headgear is not going to work here in Australia. All a headgear does is protect you from cuts. And the NRL physio actually did a post where obviously it's a really small sample size, but wearing a headgear in the NRL actually resulted in players suffering more concussions than not. So we need to get away from thinking that's the solution. So in the NFL, since 2011, what I read, they are only allowed to do 1 contact training session per week. So I would assume if you were an NRL team, you would do that session. Let's say you played on the Saturday. Monday would probably be a recovery light ball session. Tuesday, I suppose, would be when you get really physical and you would do your contact session. And then the rest of the week would be skills, preparing for the individual side, all the way through to your captain's run. This would be really interesting. How would this affect the NRL? Would we see more points start to be leaked? I don't think so short term, because a lot of these players have been tackling since they were 6 years old. So they've already got the fine motor skills required to make that sort of tackle or tackles. But let's say this was introduced all the way down to like under 7s, where they were only allowed to do tackling once per week. I think the NRL would get to a standard of play where it's literally like OzTag, just points galore, people falling off tackles. I remember when I used to play footy, I played footy from under 6s till 17s. We would do defense almost every single training night. Almost every single training night, even when we were like 17 years old, we'd still do a lot of tackling. And when I did play footy, I played in Premier's Division, I played in 3rd Division, 1st Division. And it was still the same. We tackled every single training session. So, interesting that Luke Keary is calling for this. He is a player that's been concussed multiple times. That could play into this. And ultimately, I don't think the standard of play will drop from NRL players short term. But long term, if they introduce this from like a grassroots level up, yeah, the standard of play is going to drop big time, I believe. A meeting with Des Hasler's management and Manly bosses today reportedly concluded with his future secured for 2023 and 2024. I mean, what is going on at Manly? There are so many media reports surrounding Manly at the moment. I cannot believe they are even beginning to consider sacking Des Hasler. I think it can't be results-based because we saw last year when he has a healthy side that they're in the top 4. If not, I think they finished 4th. They didn't do the best in finals, but they're still a top 4 side. This year, I think there's genuine excuses for Desi, right? Let's start with the Tom Trbojevic injury for one. We've seen in previous seasons, it's very hard to compete without Tom Trbojevic. And I think there's a lot of NRL clubs, even Melbourne. You took Ryan Pappenhausen out. They weren't a top 4 squad anymore. Fair enough. Fair play. They're still in the top 8. But they weren't a top 4 side anymore. I think there's a lot going on off the field in the background of Manly at the moment. It sounds like the Fulton family has a lot of pull at the club still. There's a new CEO at the club. He probably wants things his way. But I do think this is a bit of an overreaction from Manly. If they are fully healthy next year and Des Hasler was able to keep his same coaching staff, I'd back him to return to the top, maybe not top 4. I'd definitely back him to return to the top 8 and be competitive all season. So a little bit of an overreaction. As I always go back to, guys, fans love to say, let's sack the coach. Who is there to replace him right now? I already explained why Shane Flanagan won't work in a few episodes ago. Because when Shane Flanagan went to the Sharks, he was able to build his roster from ground up. There wasn't huge amounts of the salary cap chewed up. Whereas if Shane Flanagan was to take over Des, Jake Trbojevic, 900k, Tom Trbojevic, 1.1 mil, Daly Cherry Evans, 1.2 mil. There's a 30-year salary cap there and 3 players. So, Des Hasler is currently the best man for the job, in my opinion, and this is the right decision. This is a really interesting one here. Kurt Capewell is reportedly set to undergo shoulder reconstruction after it was revealed he played the back half of the season through pain. He is expected to return for Broncos preseason, so that is positive news there for Broncos. And just looking at Kurt Capewell towards the end of the season, he did really drop off defensively. He is usually known as a defensive leader, and he was not being a defensive leader for the Broncos towards the end of the year. He was missing multiple tackles per games, which is not like Kurt Capewell. I remember watching and thinking, is this an attitude thing? Well, this makes perfect sense, right? I mean, playing through the pain of a shoulder that requires reconstruction, I could see most people missing quite a few tackles a game, right? And so we go to the start of the season. Let's go to up until round 10. He was missing 2 tackles, 5 tackles, 2, 2, 4, 5. Some games he missed as little as 1 and 2. But then you go towards the end of the year. 6 tackles, 5 tackles, 5 tackles, 9 tackles, 6 tackles, 7 tackles. Consistently missing more and more tackles. I believe this would probably be the most tackles Capewell's ever missed in a season throughout his career. But it would be so hard defending with that shoulder injury. I did have Kurt Capewell at one stage in my Australian Kangaroos side as my back rower. Now he will be unavailable for the Kangaroos. Whether you had him in your lineup or not, I think he might have been somewhere around the squad. Maybe even for his utility value because he can play centre. He's not the best there, but he can play it. As I said earlier in the video, my back row is a Crichton and Murray currently, so I didn't have Capewell there anyway, but unfortunately he misses his case. I do think with Broncos finishing 9th anyway, Mal probably wouldn't have considered him. But if Broncos, in another world, if they didn't fall out of that 8, he didn't require a shoulder reconstruction, I could definitely see Capewell somewhere within this Kangaroo squad. All the best to Capewell. Hopefully the shoulder surgery is uncomplicated and goes well. I've had both my shoulders operated on, and any sort of movements above head, moving around like this right now, it causes pain here, up in my neck, everywhere. Shoulder surgeries are awful. But the good news for Capewell is he will get the best possible care with the professional medical staff there at the Broncos. So fingers crossed for a speedy recovery for Kurt Capewell. News Corp report the Dragons are set to sign Jacob Liddell for the 2023 season. The Mole also reports subsequently to this that Andrew McCulloch is set to retire. I think Mac is on a fair decent wicket there at the Dragons, probably chewing up a fair bit of their salary. And someone like Jacob Liddell, he's younger, more explosive out of dummy half, Probably not as good defensively, but does offer a hell of a lot more in attack at this stage of Macca's career. If Andrew McCulloch does decide to hang up the gloves, or the boots in this instance, what a remarkable career. Played Origin, played in grand finals, played over 300 NRL games, a real legend of the sport. I wish he didn't have me blocked on Instagram, but he does for some reason. I don't know why. And Jacob Liddell, we haven't seen too much of him recently, but if he was to stay at the Tigers, I can safely say we weren't going to see any of him because Api Coruscant's an 80-minute hooker. You saw the Panthers want to get Mitch Kenny more involved this year, but they weren't really bringing him on for hooker all that much. They were bringing him on in a lock role because you need Coruscant in and around the ruck for 80 minutes. So unless he was going to play Origin Coruscant again and needed games off or he was injured, we weren't going to see the Tigers next year. Moving to the Dragons is also smart because I believe the Tigers will cover probably at least half of his salary that year. So the Dragons will get him on their books for a cheaper deal. And it's almost like a try before you buy. See how he's performing and then make the decision, okay, do we want to re-sign him or no, thank you, but no, thank you. We're going to move on and go back to market. This makes sense for all parties involved. Tigers get a little bit of salary cap space back. Dragons get a hooker for cheap with Tigers paying half, and Liddell actually get a chance to play NRL game time, especially if Andrew McCulloch is retiring as it is reported. Roosters prop Match Lodge admits he would love to stay with the club past this year. However, a salary cap squeeze may force him out. He did say, hopefully some room comes in. It's a good club, but I'm not in a rush. Something along pretty much that line. So the Roosters are losing quite a few players this year. You would think they'd be able to clear up enough to sign Matt Lodge. Maybe not on like the $800,000 that Warriors were paying him. But, I mean, if I type in Roosters departing players for 2022, you'd think that... So they're losing Lachlan Lamb. Well, they've already lost him. Freddie Lussick, Kevin Naigama, Daniel Saluka Fafita, Sualii Takiaho, Sam Verrills, and Ronald Volkman. Between the salaries of Saluka Fafita, who's already left, Freddie Lussick, Sualii Takiaho, and Sam Verrills, you'd think there'd be enough there to sign Matt Lodge. You'd hope. And he is playing fantastic footy. I think this is the best footy I've ever seen Matt Lodge play. Maybe he was a little bit better when he was under Bennett at the Broncos, but in terms of impact on footy games, which is quite rare for a prop, him and Jared Warrior-Hargraves are having genuine impact on footy games and determining results, which is something you don't usually say about props, but they are setting the tone for games, and the rest of the team are following. Look at their game against Melbourne when they went to war against Nelson Asofa-Solomona. And if I'm the Roosters, I'm going to find a way to sign Matt Lodge on a 1 or 2 year deal just for how well he is playing. I know a lot of people don't like him for his his off-field situation from a few years ago. But ultimately, I think if you to sit here and tell me Matt Lodge isn't playing good footy right now, I'd absolutely disagree with that. He is playing superb, and I think the Roosters will find a way to keep him. The Roosters rarely ever lose a player they want to keep, and that's the key thing there. Adam Clune. The Knights halfback has reportedly rejected an approach from Warrington in the Super League to remain loyal to Newcastle. Interesting stuff because the Knights are interested in signing Brodie Croft. They have signed Tyson Gamble, and they have Jake Clifford on the books. As it currently stands, my halves combination next year would be Jake Clifford and it would be Tyson Gamble, which leaves Adam Clune back in New South Wales Cup. I think eventually Clune will make the move to Super League. I don't think he's quite up to NRL standards for halfbacks. All of his best work throughout his career has been in New South Wales Cup, where he's topped the try-assist leaderboard there once as well. I think it might have just come down to timing, right? Moving over to England is a big move, and you want to be prepared for it. You don't want to be doing it via a last-minute approach from a club in Warrington, particularly, right, when you've already got a deal in place for next year. I'm assuming he'd be on at least 300 grand, and that's a lot of money to sit around in a beautiful place like Newcastle and play New South Wales Cup. At the end of that deal, then go and move to the poor weather conditions of England for 500k. Once you've discussed it with your wife, kids, family, whatever's going on there for Adam Clune, I'm not sure. I think for now it's just timing. I think eventually we will see Adam Clune in the Super League. Andrew Johns has endorsed Kalyn Ponga moving into the halves next year and believes he could become the most dangerous attacking 5'8" in the game. I disagree. Kalyn Ponga only played 7 full games last year. He would really need to work on his tackling technique as well, moving into that front line, because he'd be forced to make more tackles, and he's already been concussed a lot now, not making those tackles. He is probably known as one of the worst defensive fullbacks in the competition currently. And so moving into the front line does... And I mean, if you're playing the Knights and you've got Viliami Kikau, Dave Fafita, Keon Kolamatangi, Tyson... No, not Tyson Fazeli plays for them. Isaiah Papali'i. If you've got these sort of edge back rows, your game plan is to literally run them at Ponga. And then he's going to be too tired in attack to come up with the plays he does at fullback. And when we talk about Kalyn Ponga coming up plays, for years now, his signature play has been taking it to the line, looking short, and flying a huge cutout pass to the winger. And if that's your key play as a 5'8", you're going to be found out pretty quick. You're going to be intercepted, or the other winger's just not going to come up and in. He's just going to sit on his man and smash your man over the sideline. So I really don't like Kalyn Ponga moving into the halves. I don't know exactly why. I just don't like it. I think defensively it's something I've mentioned. But number 2, he's still a great fullback. He was MVP in the State of Origin Game 3 with an insane performance. If he could get that somewhat consistent to NRL level, my God, he'd be one of the world's best fullbacks. There's always been this constant obsession of moving him to 5'8" to get his hands on the ball more. And I almost think that's a little bit of a myth, because when the Knights do a backline play, Ponga is there anyway, 9 times out of 10, in a fullback capacity, where he's out the back receiving more time and space than he would if he was the first receiver at 5'8". He's a little bit wider, a little bit deeper, a little bit more time, a little bit more room to work, and that's what makes him dangerous. So, really don't like this. Really hard to disagree with someone like Andrew Johns, because he is such a legend and someone I've looked up to since I was 7 years old. So I hate disagreeing with Joey, but I've got to. One key thing that could make Kalyn Ponga and could put egg all over my face is the fact Andrew Johns is there as a halves coach, right? Could you imagine Kalyn Ponga being coached 101 by Andrew Johns for a whole preseason? Now, that could be seriously dangerous. And I have to admit, that could be egg all over my face. 1,000,000%. But that wraps up all the news for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into Clarkey Reacts for the 9th of September. That's all the footy news today. My thoughts, opinions, breakdown of it all. I appreciate you guys being here. And I will see you all again probably tomorrow. Might take weekends off. We'll see how I'm traveling for time. But hopefully I'll see you guys again tomorrow. And if not, we'll be here on a more consistent basis on YouTube. And it's been great to get back on YouTube with you guys. So thank you very much, guys. Looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks.